Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by.
It is hell to feel terribly torn in two directions. It was hell to feel terribly torn between two people I loved. It was one of the worst days of my 76 years. It was after Christmas, 1981. I was 36. My mother was 74. And just the two of us that day in our Illinois farmhouse. My mother was born and grew up in that house. I grew up in that house. The phone rang that day. It was my beloved Don calling from New Mexico or Colorado. And when my mother heard it was Don, she looked upset. I felt terribly torn between my mother, who deeply loved me, greatly needed me, and this young, attractive man, Don. And after the phone call and seeing her look upset, I went upstairs to my room. I got the money my mother and dad had given me for Christmas. I came downstairs. I threw the money on the floor. I told my mother, to hell with you and your money. I'm leaving. I went out the door. I walked up the country road. I turned around. I walked back to the house. And as I stood outside, I saw and heard my mother inside crying desperately, like an orphan in the universe. She was a very sick woman for many years. What if she had had a stroke or a heart attack and died that day because of my leaving? How would I have ever explained that? What happened to our family? Would they have ever forgiven me? Would I have forgiven myself? Eventually, I went inside, and she was so glad I had come back. She reached out her dear arms to hug me. But sadly, at that moment, I refused her hugs. One of many things I would aim to change if I had my life to live over, knowing what I know now. And that day was one of the worst days of my life. The memory haunts me. The memory humbles me. And now, 40 years later, I would love to hug her 1,000,000 times if I could. I look back now. I see the heavy pressures on her. I see the heavy pressures on me that day. On my mother's side, I was her closest friend. She needed my help greatly. She appreciated my help deeply. I took her to many doctors. She had suffered hell, trapped in a sick body for many years. And she had never met Don, but she greatly feared if Don or some other man became my lover, she would lose some of her closeness with me. And after my brother married his wife years before, he was no longer as close to our mother as he had been. She had invited her very special friend Dee and his family to visit us during the Christmas season, but they did not come. I did many things for her she was not able to do herself, and now she felt I was rejecting her. I was abandoning her when I got so very angry and walked up the road. On my side, I hate the cold and snow of winters in Illinois, and this was after Christmas. I was homesick for my life, my friends in Albuquerque. She and I had had a huge argument months before about my human right to have a lover companion. My older brother had his wife, his children. And no one in the world will ever love me more than my mother did. And probably no one will ever love me as much as she did. I had been a preacher many years before that day. I had worked with many youth in Illinois, Arizona, Albuquerque. I had hosted a radio program in Albuquerque, but that day in Illinois, I tasted hell as I felt terribly torn between my mother and Don. My mother was my all-time closest friend, despite all of our conflicts and arguments. 6 weeks or so later, after this day, as she lay in the hospital the day before she died, she told me, "I love you." And I told her, "I love you," in our last conversation. And the next morning, her sister, my dad, and I were with her in intensive care as she gasped her last. Our lives have many very painful, precious lessons. I want to be with my mother, my dad, Don, and all my many friends and loved ones in a much better place beyond death. But I strongly doubt that happens. Wanting something does not make it so. Why bullshit myself when I do not know? I love to dance to beautiful music. Oldies, Freddie Fender, Elvis Presley, Willie Nelson, mariachi music, Diana Ross and the Supremes, Motown. I've never taken dance lessons in my life. I just dance what I feel. I dance with my friends, Maria or other women, and I dance much of the time by myself. I would be glad, very glad, to dance with certain men. But sadly, most men do not have the balls to dance with men unless it's in a gay bar. Women sometimes dance with women at fiestas. Why not men with men? In 1986, 36 years ago, I danced at a street dance with my boyfriend David in Freeport, Illinois, 6 miles from the family farm where I grew up. And later that evening, David and I danced together at a Mexican bar, not a gay bar, in Rockford, Illinois, a much larger town. No one beat us up. No one threatened us. Who knows how many men seeing us wished they had had the balls to dance with a man friend. Governments lie, especially in a time of war. All governments lie. Truth is the first casualty of war. No one on earth is born evil. Not Hitler, not Trump, not Putin, not the 18-year-old very abused white man who murdered my grandparents. When a kid is severely abused, when a kid is starved for love, he or she often abuses others many years later. If the kid has at least one close, caring adult friend, he or she may slowly heal from the awful abuse. In 2013, 15-year-old Nehemiah Griego, here in Albuquerque, murdered his mother, his father, 2 younger sisters, 1 younger brother. Nehemiah Griego was not born evil. I strongly compliment his aunt, Regina Griego, for her 2022 book, Sins of the System, Trauma, Guns, Tragedy, and the Betrayal of Our Children. This book is in the library. I urge you to check it out. Regina Griego, the author, Sins of the System, Trauma, Guns, Tragedy, and the Betrayal of Our Children. Nehemiah's aunt Regina writes about the abuse that Nehemiah's father had suffered as a kid. Regina loved her brother, who was Nehemiah's father, and she knew how he had been abused as a kid. An awful abuse that went back generations in their family. Regina says, hurt people hurt people. Traumatized people pass on the trauma unless it is healed. Hiding of families' poisoned secrets continues the tragic cycle of the abused becoming abusers. My family had serious problems, but if I had suffered as Nehemiah suffered, might I have murdered my family as he did? If my dad had often beaten me at least once to unconsciousness with possible brain injury, if our home had had guns, if my mother had told me I wish we lived in biblical times so I could stone you to death, if I had been forbidden to have friends outside of church, if my dad had taught me to be tough and had glorified being a soldier, if my dad had made me patrol our high-walled compound several hours a day, if I had often suffered hunger with not enough to eat, might I, like Nehemiah, have felt trapped in hell and exploded in deadly evil rage? Nehemiah's murder of his family was evil, no question about that. But no one on earth can say for sure that if they had suffered what Nehemiah suffered, they would not have committed the same atrocity. Nehemiah's main therapist at juvenile detention after he was arrested. His main therapist at juvenile detention said Nehemiah was the best behaved resident in treatment there. Nehemiah took responsibility for the murder of his family. And we all are more than the worst thing we ever did or almost did. When Nehemiah was 15, when he murdered his family, he read at third grade level. But after his arrest, while he was locked up in juvenile detention, Nehemiah completed high school. He took some college courses. He read a lot. And Nehemiah wanted someday to help other abused kids heal. With much help, we can turn from evil. We can change. Nehemiah is now 25 years old. Sadly, he is now in prison in North Carolina, far away from New Mexico. He's been stabbed 8 times so far in prison. He is scared to death, but he's holding on. His Aunt Regina and other family survivors had urged the Albuquerque judge to send Nehemiah to an adult treatment center near Houston, Texas. And they were willing, Regina and other family members were willing to pay for that treatment. But sadly, the judge here in Albuquerque refused that offer. The judge sent him to prison instead. I wrote to the judge recently. I condemned her evil decision. Nehemiah agrees with and compliments his Aunt Regina's book entitled Sins of the System: Trauma, Guns, Tragedy, and the Betrayal of Our Children. Please check out that book in our city library. The author again, Regina Griego. My mother and my dad both died in the month of February. My mother, 1982, 40 years ago. My dad, 1994, 28 years ago. If we were close to our parents, we can keep learning lessons from their lives for many years after they die until the day we die. If my mother had been in love with my dad or another man, if my mother had had lots of passionate sex and romance that she yearned for and that she was surely capable of, my mother probably would not have become addicted to sugar shit. My mother probably would not have ballooned from 98 pounds at 26 to 270 pounds in her 50s. My mother probably would not have suffered hell in her body for 30 years. She probably would not have bought so much stuff she did not need. And if my dad had been in love with my mother or another woman and had lots of passionate sex and romance, my dad might not have become a workaholic. We can learn many lessons from our parents' lives, and anyone who can learn from my mistakes in life, power to them. Most, if not all of us, men and women, gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans, heterosexual, most, if not all of us, need and want at least one person who is strongly sexually attracted to us and to whom we are strongly sexually attracted. At least one person we can enjoy passionate sex with. If we do not have that passionate sex and romance with anyone, we're more likely to become addicted to junk food, to booze, to other drugs. If we do not have that passionate sex and romance with anyone, we are more likely to become addicted to buying lots of crap we do not need, addicted to gambling, becoming workaholics. If we do not have passionate sex and romance with anyone, we are more likely to suffer depression and to become bitter about life or become addicted to religion. In New York City, two brothers, both of them cops, both of them police officers, had 10 years of spotless records as cops. But these two brothers got into an awful argument. One brother shot and killed his drunk brother. And if anyone weeks before that could have told these two brothers when they as cops were arresting other people that one would shoot and kill the other, how would they have believed it? If anyone years earlier could have told the Albuquerque judge, a white man, Gerald Cole, that he would shoot and kill his wife and then himself, how would this white judge, Gerald Cole, in Albuquerque, have believed it? Homes that have guns have more risk of someone killing someone else, more risk of a suicide than homes with no guns. A gun in the house is far more likely to shoot oneself or a family member or a friend than to shoot a stranger breaking in. We all are capable of terrifying violence. Good and evil are mixed together in all of us. So don't swallow the lie that only bad people will use guns wrong. None of us is immune to killing someone, even a close loved one, in a moment of insane rage. And because I know that about myself, and because I aim to live peaceably and non-violently toward all people, I drink no booze. I have never owned a gun. Sadly, my mother and dad had a miserable marriage, but I'm so glad they were not boozers. I'm so glad they owned no guns. In a study in Virginia, 15 severely retarded children were given special vitamin and mineral supplements to test the theory that mental retardations are in part due to not enough vitamins and minerals. These 15 severely retarded children, their IQs rose an average of 16 points after taking the supplements for 8 months. The supplements contained 8 minerals, 11 vitamins, including magnesium, calcium, zinc, iron, vitamins A, C, D, E, and the B vitamins. The IQ of one Down syndrome child rose 25 points during the study, and 2 of the children who continued to take the supplements after the study ended, and whose IQs now measure 90 to more than 100, were transferred out of programs for the retarded and into regular schools, and grades on their teachers' recommendations. Also, the vision of several children who wore glasses improved. 3 children with Down syndrome lost the puffiness of the face and extremities. The IQ of one child who'd been brought up to normal school level while taking those vitamin and mineral supplements dropped down to the 50s when his parents took him off the pills. The powerful testimony of an atomic bomb survivor of Hiroshima. She spoke in New York City in 2005. Saiko Ikeda says, "I have come from the city of nuclear bombing and the city of peace, Hiroshima, with all my hope to put an end to the mistakes of the past, the miserable warfare, the possession of nuclear weapons that can destroy all humanity." August 6, 1945, she says it was a very hot day. At 8:15, the first nuclear bomb in human history was dropped in Hiroshima. And at the time of bombing, She says, I was working as a mobilized schoolgirl, taking down buildings as a measure to reduce the risk of damage in case of disasters. She says, I was 13 years old, grade 7. There was a very strong flash of light, a big sound. Everything became darkness. I was blown away by the shock waves for over 15 feet. My hair was all burnt and frizzled. My clothes were ragged. The skin on my arms and legs peeled and hanging. I could see the red inner flesh. I cried for help, roaming around. And there were piled up bodies, burned crisp in black. There also were so many people covered with blood, little strength to cry out for help. I had to pass by or even walk over these people to continue looking for some help somewhere. When I saw a river, I couldn't help diving in because my body was burning hot. She says the river was filled with people. I could not see the surface of the water. People were also dying, disappearing under the water. Many unidentified bodies stayed in that water for days, being moved by tides every day. I had a neighbor friend who made it home after 2 days. The family was happy to see her looking healthy. It took her a month to start feeling really ill, to stay in bed. She lost all her hair. She started bleeding from her nose, her mouth, her ears. Not so long later, she died from the acute symptoms of radiation poisoning. And this woman says, around that time, my fever started to come down. I was able to walk a little. The wounds were healing, but I felt something strange about my face. I found the mirror that my family had hid away to look at my face. The shock I had when I saw my face was so terrible, I wished I were dead. I cannot describe how much I have suffered from it all my life. Even if I could find the words to describe, I'm not sure anybody can understand how it really felt. To have my face look close to how it used to be. I had 15 operations in total. But this survivor of Hiroshima says, I am alive. I am more fortunate than those people I saw suffering on the street or in the river dying. I will never forget those people's faces in such agony. And even after 60 years, and this survivor was speaking this in New York City in 2005, people are dying from the after effects of the nuclear bombing. I feel anxious thinking that it could be my turn tomorrow. As surviving victims, we have kept expressing our uneasiness, our anger, our hope for world peace with no nuclear weapons. But why? Why are people still fighting in war? She says Hiroshima is a place to learn the dignity of a life, but war, terrorism, nuclear weapons take lives. War does not only bring death to oneself, but to parents, children, brothers, sisters, friends. There are no winners or losers in nuclear wars. What is waiting is the destruction of humanity and the end of planet Earth as we know it. If humanity does not diminish nuclear weapons, the nuclear weapons will diminish humanity. To any of the scientists, highly paid, highly educated at Sandia Weapons Lab, at Los Alamos Weapons Lab, at Livermore Weapons Lab in California, do they have any idea of the hell they constantly create every working day? When I was in my teens and in my 20s and into my 30s, I sang many solos in churches. My mother was my number one fan. But I no longer believe many of the words I used to sing. I still like some of the tunes and the deep feelings of some of those religious songs. I could fake it. I could still sing those solos in churches. But I aim to speak the truth. So why would I sing words I no longer believe? I wonder how many of the choirs of churches all over this country and all over the world actually believe all the words that they sing in church services. If singing words I do not believe any better than speaking words, I do not believe. Now, I love the deep feelings and the beautiful melodies of many country western songs, the oldies. But I reject many of the words of those songs about booze, revenge, lying, jealousy, cheating, violence. Hating myself when I wrong others does not make me a better person. Damning myself when I seriously hurt someone does not make me a better person. We can become better to other people when we become a better friend and more forgiving to ourselves. Imagine how the most loving parent would be to a son or a daughter who committed evil. And I need to be that most loving parent to myself when I seriously wrong someone. Imagine how the most loving friend or the most loving coach would treat someone who did serious wrong. And we can learn to be that loving parent, that loving friend, that loving coach to ourselves. Not giving up on ourselves, not cursing ourselves as hopeless, as no good. We can become one of our own best friends because damning ourselves often leads to shame, to boozing, to other drug addiction. Damning ourselves often makes us more mean to other people. If we want to deeply love and forgive other people, we need to start with loving and forgiving ourselves. We need to face what we did wrong, we need to confess and make amends, but not tell ourselves we are no good. Like a small child learning to walk, falling, but getting up and trying again. How do you choose what you eat? Do you let the television or the billboards or the magazine ads addict you to unhealthy shit? Do you let your family, your friends addict you to factory fake fast food crap? My number one test to eat some certain food is it healthy? Is it raw? Is it plant food from the earth? Will this food help me or harm me? My number two test, do I like the taste? My number three test for foods is, how much does it cost? And sadly, many people do not usually choose what they eat, making how healthy it is number one. The most important question for every mouthful. Read the labels on any processed food in boxes or cans or jars. Would you sign any legal document if you did not read and understand the fine print in that document? No legal document ever is more important than our body's health. Do we wonder why millions of people worldwide hate and fear the U.S. government? From Afghanistan, heart-wrenching stories of families whose lives were ripped apart by the U.S. war on Afghanistan. A 6-year-old boy from Kabul named Fardin was sound asleep next to his brothers and sisters when a terrifying bomb, a U.S. bomb, came barreling down from the sky, destroying his home and 5 others, leaving 15 people dead. Though Fardin survived, he became like a baby, this 6-year-old boy. He stopped walking. He had to be carried all day. He stopped talking except for high-pitched shrieks. He didn't sleep through the night. He wet his bed. His family was too poor to take him to a doctor. Besides, there were only 8 psychiatrists in the traumatized nation of Afghanistan for over 20 million people. Do we wonder why millions worldwide hate and fear this government? Azizola was a healthy 20-year-old who worked with his father as a house painter. He was trying to save money so he could get married and have a family, but that dream was dashed when a U.S. bomb aimed at the Kabul airport instead hit his home not far away. The debris that penetrated his left leg left him in excruciating pain. Not having decent medical care, the leg became infected. It had to be amputated above the knee. Azizola had no money to get a prosthetic leg or a wheelchair. His family was borrowing money from friends and relatives to rebuild their home, putting them deeply in debt. Ulaya Kudus had always depended on the income of her husband, Abdul, to feed their 6 children. Abdul worked as a guard at a marble pit until a U.S. bomb aimed at a Taliban garrison near the mine hit him, and left with 6 small children, no income. The mother, Ulaya, cried and cried. She was ashamed of sending her children out to beg for food. She pleaded for help to keep her children from starving. Do we wonder why millions worldwide hate and fear the U.S. government? Do you understand why I would never encourage any young person in this nation to become a U.S. soldier, murdering our sisters and brothers in other countries? Alfalfa is one of the most nourishing foods on earth. I enjoy eating alfalfa in my all raw, homemade blended smoothies every day. The word alfalfa comes from Arabic. Alfalfa means father of all foods. The roots of alfalfa go deep into the ground, 40 feet, 60 feet, even 100 feet or 130 feet, to reach many minerals most other plants' roots do not reach. Now, of course, the roots of alfalfa often hit rock long before 100 feet or even 60 feet, but they can go that deep. Alfalfa is high in protein. People may wonder, well, where do you get your protein? Well, I get it from seeds and alfalfa, other greens. Many foods have protein, better protein than getting it from meat and dairy. Alfalfa contains vitamins A, E, K, D, U, and folic acid. Alfalfa has abundant green chlorophyll, and green chlorophyll is the blood of green plants, much like human blood, except for the color. The mineral magnesium makes chlorophyll green, and the mineral iron makes our blood red. Alfalfa softens hard arteries. Alfalfa helps stomach problems, ulcers, gas, farting. Alfalfa helps fatigue, diabetes, infection. Alfalfa cleans and tones the intestines. Alfalfa helps sore throat, ear problems, skin sores. Alfalfa builds vitality, strength, energy, endurance. Alfalfa helps abscesses, the prostate, dropsy, arthritis. Alfalfa builds healthy weight. It helps fat people lose fat. It helps people too thin gain by stimulating their appetite. Alfalfa helps conquer addiction to booze and to narcotic drugs. Alfalfa promotes good sleep, increases mother's milk, purifies the blood. Alfalfa helps lower back pains, improves resistance to disease. I grow lots of alfalfa in my garden. Alfalfa is my favorite green. I enjoy alfalfa in my all-raw homemade smoothies that have over 20 ingredients. Sadly, racism and white supremacy saturate our culture. Why is Angel's food cake white? Why is Devil's food cake dark? When I was a boy, why were the flesh color crayons pinkish white? Why was the saying free, white, and 21? Damn racism, white supremacy. Life has many cages that we can get trapped in. The religion cage, the marriage cage, the skin color cage, the nation cage, the always wanting more money, more stuff cage. But we do not need to stay trapped in any cage. There's much more to life than any cage. And gangs come in many flavors: church gangs, street gangs, scientist gangs. When will we see and feel all the world's people as our family? I strongly compliment African-American U.S. Representative John Lewis for refusing to go murder people in Vietnam. U.S. Representative John Lewis was the first black man in the history of the state of Alabama to be classified as a conscientious objector, a person opposed to war, opposed to becoming a soldier. And in his struggle for the civil rights of black people in this nation, John Lewis was arrested more than 40 times, but he never struck back when he was assaulted in those arrests. Lewis remembers Martin Luther King Jr. saying, "Love the hell out of them." So, if there is meanness and anger and hatred in them, we've got to love it out. I strongly compliment African-American activist James Lawson. He also, like John Lewis, was a conscientious objector to war, but he spent 14 months in jail for his refusal to become a professional hired killer in the U.S. military in Korea. African-American James Lawson said, "When a person is cursing you to your face, even as he's spitting on you or pushing a lit cigarette into your neck or beating you with a truncheon, if you can understand and feel, even in the midst of those critical and often physically painful moments, that your attacker is as much a victim as you are, and that he is a victim of the forces that have shaped him and fed his anger and his fury, then you are well on your way to the non-violent life." I love passion in romance. I love passion in living all of life. But I want my passion also always to be guided by compassion for all people. Passion by itself is like a fire. It can keep us from freezing to death, or it can kill us. Passion by itself is like a river. It can irrigate our crops to keep us alive, or it can kill us in a flood. I love passion, but I want my passion always to be guided by compassion for all people. In life, sometimes what first seems blessings become curses. And sometimes what first seems curses become blessings. I'm deeply indebted to many, many, many people, a great variety of people who have taught me, loved me, inspired me. I constantly collect wisdom on how to live, how not to live. I'm deeply indebted to my friends and my enemies. In romance between a man and a woman, between men or between women, often one is more attracted than the other. Often one is ready to go deeper, more personal in conversation than the other. One is more free than the other in sex, licking the whole body, including the asshole. And the more eager one needs to be patient with the partner or find another partner more open and ready. If we try to pry open a rose bud, we can ruin the rose. No booze, no beers, none of that shit for me, but my fresh piss every day for health, to your health. Good night.
Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be